I'm Dustin Cormier, and this is the How to Rock Astrology audio series. The information in this recording is copyrighted by Dustin Cormier, 2015, all rights reserved, except where noted in the recording. The following information on ascendant or rising signs comes from Stephen Arroyo's Chart Interpretation Handbook, copyrighted in 1989 by Stephen Arroyo, published by CRCS Publications in Sebastopol, California. I do not own the following content. Guidelines to interpreting the ascendant. Although the ascendant is of deep and pervasive importance for each individual, there is no denying that it must be related to the rest of the chart, and especially to the sun sign, in order to understand it thoroughly for a particular person. The sun, after all, is the core identity, the very center of the consciousness, the way we assimilate much of our experience, whereas the ascendant, although it varies in importance from person to person, is not as central to the person's nature. It shows, among other things, the approach to life, but the sun shows life itself. The ascendant must serve the purposes, values, and creative goals of the sun for the individual to function happily and fully. A useful tool for understanding how a person's ascendant and sun sign interact is to compare the elements of the two factors. For example, a Cancer sun sign person with a fire sign rising is usually far more extroverted, forcefully expressive, and confident than a Cancer sun individual with, say, a more conservative, self-protective earth sign rising. For another example, an air sign sun person with a water sign rising may appear much more emotional than he or she really is, whereas a water sign sun person with an air sign rising may appear far more detached and less emotional than he or she really is. It should be pointed out that people are often relatively unaware of their ascendant nature as compared to their sun sign. In that sense, the ascendant is a factor that can be consciously developed further over time and consciously utilized to aid one's self-expression. I've known people who are relieved to find what their rising signs were, since it finally gave them a way of identifying a very deep but only semi-conscious tendency in themselves. In some cases, the qualities and abilities symbolized by the ascendant were just beginning to emerge, and learning the astrological keys to this factor helped personal development greatly. I should emphasize here that perhaps more than with most other factors in the chart, the early environment can encourage or suppress the expression of the ascendant's energies, since it is a primary channel with which one interacts with the outer world. The reader should view the following comparative evaluations as guidelines and as questions to explore, rather than as rigid statements of absolute truth. Gemini Modality or Quadruplicity. The Gemini Modality is mutable, the flexible energy mode. There are exactly 4 of these flexible signs in the zodiac belonging to the mutable modality. These include Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo, and they all share similar characteristics. All 4 of these signs exhibit more of an ability to lighten up and go with the flow than the other 8 signs of the zodiac. They're typically more light and lively, and more apt to entertain new ideas, even if they sometimes lack the concentration needed to always get to the bottom line. These flexible signs share the challenge to be more deliberate and focused, to be willing to slow down enough to avoid confusion or miss the point. The element of the ascendant. The element of the ascendant reveals the quality of energy flow directly vitalizing the physical body and the overall approach to life. Fire or air signs rising tend to conduct energy, encouraging active self-expression and dynamic expenditure of energy. Earth or water rising signs tend to conserve and resist the flow of vital energies, and hence indicate self-containment, sometimes self-repression, and the tendency of living within oneself. Air signs rising, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. Mentally quick and active, inquisitive, social, friendly, verbal. Often clever with rapid perceptions. Can be overly intellectual to the point of chronically debating everything inwardly without taking action. Wants to understand everything. Lives a lot in the world of concepts. Has a natural facility for communication and perceiving others' viewpoints. Gemini Ascendant or Gemini Rising. the most inquisitive and friendly rising sign, but also the one most inclined to be worried about oneself all the time, except perhaps Libra rising in some cases. Usually very intelligent and curious, and has a tremendous need to communicate verbally. The superficiality so often seen in Gemini Sun is not usually as evident in the Gemini Ascendant, but the tendency for one side of the mind not to know what the other side thinks or says is often even more extreme in the Gemini Ascendant, which can be most infuriating to those who would like to rely on the person and believe what he or she says. The person is not intentionally dishonest, it is just that the right hand knows not what the left hand is doing. I should also state, however, that I have encountered at least 2 Gemini rising people who are very reliable. The following information comes from Isabel Hickey's classic text, Astrology, A Cosmic Science, copyrighted in 1992 by Isabel M. Hickey Trust, published by CRCS Publications in Sebastopol, California. I do not own the following content. Gemini on the Ascendant. Sense of duality strong. 2 personalities in one body fighting for control. Indecisive and unsure. Friendly, adaptable, witty, and clever. Extremely nervous and high-strung. Temperamental. Appear confident, but lack confidence and inner sureness. People make them nervous, but they love an audience, for they love to talk. Talk with their hands as well as with their tongues. Make good conversationalists, writers, and reporters. Function from their minds and are very active mentally. Good dispositions when they are calm and serene within. Note position by sign and house and aspects of Mercury to know how this personality projects itself into the outer world. The following information comes from The Secrets of Your Rising Sign by William Lamb with Webb Harris Jr., copyrighted by William Lamb in 2004, first published in the USA by Fair Winds Press in Gloucester, Massachusetts. I do not own the following content. Chatty-faced, "Hi, how you doing? Where you from? I been there. See you later." Jitterbug Gemini is the icing on the cake of the zodiac. People with Gemini rising are sincere and unassuming, adept at making other people feel comfortable in their presence, just genuinely nice folks. From their early years, they're incredibly curious, annoying adults with endless questions. What's this? What's that? Why? Their inquisitive nature usually leads them to an interest in books and learning that follows them into adulthood. These people are inherently agile and capable of juggling 2 or 3 tasks at once. They're quick-minded and fond of displaying intelligence. Physical type, a youthful appearance. Favored colors, pale yellow, light gray. The following information comes from Isabel Hickey's Astrology, A Cosmic Science, copyrighted in 1992 by Isabel M. Hickey Trust, published by CRCS Publications in Sebastopol, California. The significance of the Sun and the Sun sign in astrology. The symbol of the Sun in astrology is a circle with a dot in the middle. This is a very deep occult spiritual symbolism. The circle represents the eternal self that did not start here and does not finish here on earth. The dot in the middle represents the divine spark at the center of every living cell, the light which lighteth every man with which cometh into the world. It is the point of light at the center of every living cell. In the blueprint, the sun represents the main expression of the individual, the heart and core of beingness. The sun has a different effect on individuals born at different times of the year. According to the sign and house in which the sun is placed, we are able to judge the general vitality and physique, the qualities of leadership, and the individual's ability to succeed in life. In a personal chart, the sun represents the basic drive for significance, the will, male relationships and female charts, especially with the father, vital energy coming from the etheric levels and prana, fuel on which the total personality operates, urge for power, constitutional strength, and finally, a powerful sun means very great power to do and to be. Keywords of the sun: will, individuality, spirit. The sun is the significator of the spirit in man, the beingness or isness of life. It rules the basic drive for significance, the will to be. Physically, the sun is the sustainer of life, giver of light, heat, and energy. More than anything else in the chart, it shows the will, man's highest expression. Its aspects show deep character traits, the chief ambitions. It needs aspects to the planets for strength of expression in the horoscope. As the sun moves through the signs, its return to the sign of its exaltation, Aries, the eastern horizon, marks the beginning of the astrological year. Springtime brings the release of a new cycle of life. As the sun moves through the houses, its return to the eastern horizon is the beginning of the astrological day, sunrise. The sun sign in its element. The following information comes from Stephen Arroyo's Chart Interpretation Handbook, copyrighted in 1989 by Stephen Arroyo, published by CRCS Publications in Sebastopol, California. I do not own the following content. The sun sign's element is usually dominant in considering the overall psychology of a person. This is so because the sun sign's element reveals the attunement of one's basic vitality, identity, and power of self-projection, as well as the fundamental quality of his or her consciousness. The element of one's sun sign reveals the basic inner force motivating everything we do. The element of the sun sign also gives insight into how any individual sees life itself and what expectations they have of the life experience. Aries Sun. Aries is a fire sign. These are the common characteristics of people born with the sun in fire signs. Basically motivated by inspirations and aspirations. Recharges energy through vigorous, physically demanding activity and by pursuing new visions for the future. Interpretive guidelines for the sun in Aries. Radiates forceful, confident vitality. Tries to fill need for recognition with self-assertion and direct, competitive actions. Forceful assertion of individuality is necessary for full self-expression. Identifies self as explorer, pioneer, the first to begin an adventure. Quickly grasps essentials. May antagonize others with too forceful expression of individuality. This final article comes from The Secrets of Your Rising Sign by William Lamb with Webb Harris, Jr., copyrighted by William Lamb in 2004, first published in the USA by Fair Winds Press in Gloucester, Massachusetts. I do not own the following content. Aries, born mid-morning. Aries with Gemini rising. Watch out! It's a ram on wheels with sports car steering. If you can't keep up, stand aside, or be ready to change directions at any moment. Talk about multitasking. Arians with Gemini rising are brimming with bright ideas and arrive with their sleeves rolled up, asking all the necessary questions to get the job done quick as a whistle. And they're flexible with everyone involved. Because they're adept at communicating and making connections, they're often found giving instruction in front of a class or working in shipping, making deliveries, piloting a plane, or even driving a bus. They also make splendid writers. They can keep 2 or 3 or even 4 things going at the same time. Communication and connecting gives them lots of acquaintances, so they can recommend a good roofer or an honest mechanic off the top of their head. These Arians love to talk, so they stay in touch. However, they're not usually good at slowing down and keeping things focused and orderly. Off-topic ramblings aren't uncommon, and their friends have to be willing to go with the flow. They get bored easily, and it's easy for them to become scattered, to plan to do too much, and leave things spread too thin to do the job punctually and properly. They plan insufficient intervals between their many appointments, so when they're forced to wait for everybody to show up, they end up running behind for the remainder of the day. They need to better budget their time. Arriving too early and anxious, or hurried and late, undermines their natural Aries charm and always makes things more difficult. Jitterbug Gemini's chatty curiosity, in tandem with Aries' early bird catches the worm, creates a person who wants to know everything right now and isn't afraid to ask, indicating a sincere interest in other people. At their best, these Arians are charming and conversant with an inoffensive light touch. They're the original Mr. Nice Guys, the icing on the cake of the zodiac. But they might tend to ramble on well after the point has been made, allowing conversation to drip toward gossip or some other superficial or irrelevant nonsense, and possibly divulging privileged information. They need to know when they've said enough and learn to be patient and quiet enough to let people consider their position, because their position is very likely to be unselfish.